Hello again. Christianity in the Social Crisis, Walter Rauschenbusch, the last chapter, What to Do, page 381. The heading is Stewardship and Ownership. Jesus in his teachings alluded with surprising frequency to the use and abuse of entrusted wealth and power. In the parables of the talents and pounds, he evidently meant to define all human ability and opportunity as a trust. His description of the head servant who is made confident by the continued absence of his master, tyrannizes over his subordinates, and fattens his paunch on the master's property, is meant to show the temptation which besets all in authority to forget the responsibility that goes with power. His portrayal of the tricky steward who is to be dismissed for dishonesty but manages to make one more grand coup before his authority ends not only shows the keen insight of Jesus into the ways of the grafter, but also shows that he regarded all men of wealth as stewards of the property they hold. The parable of the peasants who jointly rent a vineyard and then try to do their absent owner not only out of his rent, but out of the property itself, was meant by Jesus to condense and dramatize the whole history of the ruling class in Israel. The illustration of the fig tree, which has had all possible advantages of soil and care without returning fruit, and which merely gets a year's reprieve through the hopeful pleading of the gardener, expresses the indignation of Jesus against the waste of entrusted opportunity. Terrible invective against the scribes and Pharisees is directed against teachers who had misused their influence to darken truth, and leaders who had treated their leadership as a chance to get profit and honor for themselves. The fact that Jesus, in his diagnosis of wrong moral relations, so often puts his finger on trust abused and betrayed is proof of his penetrating social insight. Nearly all powers in society are essentially delegated powers. The more complex society becomes, the less will it be possible for the individual to attend to all his needs himself, and the more will he have to entrust others with specialized functions and powers. When a savage killed an animal for food and dressed its hide for clothing, he knew what he was getting. When a man buys canned meat and a ready-made suit, he has to trust to the honesty of others for what he gets. When a man deposits money in a savings bank or pays an insurance premium, he exercises trust. When he engages a lawyer to conduct a suit or search a title, the lawyer is a steward of entrusted power. When he submits the body of his child to a surgeon's knife, or its intellect to a schoolteacher, or its soul to a preacher, he trusts, and these professional men are his trustees. Our life is woven through with such relations. Trust is the foundation of all higher social life. Life is good and restful in the measure in which it is safe to trust. Life turns back to the haunting suspicion and fear of the savage when man can no longer safely trust man. On the other hand, the more complex society becomes, the more difficult it is to watch over the fidelity of all the trustees, and the greater is the temptation of a trustee or steward to divert the trust to his own use. A farming community in New England can watch how the selectmen of the township use their delegated powers. The ordinary citizen in our great cities does not understand the machinery of the government and has only a shadowy idea of what's really being done by public officers with his property and under his authority. He is, in effect, the absentee landlord, those whose servants are made bold to pilfer and cheat because the eye of the owner is not on them. Moreover, it is only when society arrives at wealth and power that grafting comes to pay. In a poor and savage community, the individual has so little that the only way to get wealth without work is by downright robbery of the weak. As the average of wealth rises and the aggregate of wealth becomes more enormous, a mere rake-off is enough to enrich the grafter. Hence, in a savage community, we have robbers and bandit chiefs. In a civilized community, we have a parasitic class who live in idleness and splendor by converting to their own use some kind of entrusted wealth or delegated power. Grafting is a highly perfected modern sin. Its essence is not stealing, but the corruption of a steward by one party and the betrayal of trust by a second party. who together profit at the expense of a third party, most frequently the public. Next time, he's on the problem of modern city life, the scale on which the parable of the wicked husbandman is being reenacted in human history today. I'll put in a link to a good illustration, maybe the best in the Bible, of how civilization corrupted Israel, and that is the story of Solomon. 4 videos that are interlinked. The first one is called Solomon in All His Glory.